Subscribe to Man Told for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. I opened the door, and the first thing I saw wasn't my son running into my arms. It was an empty house, right in the middle of the living room, the very spot where he always sat, waiting for me to come home from work trips. There was nothing but a folded piece of paper. It just lay there, still, cold, like a blade. I picked it up. The first 7 words hit me like a punch. Don't look for me. Don't look for him. Every sound in my head went silent. Time just stopped. I couldn't hear the wind outside anymore. I couldn't even feel the cold rain running down my back. Only those 7 words, burned into my mind, like someone hammered a nail straight into my chest. The suitcase slipped out of my hand. The gifts I'd spent 9 months picking out for Lucas spilled across the wooden floor. The toy airplane shattered. A sob escaped my throat before I could stop it. I looked up. This house, the place I once called home, now just walls. No wedding photos, no laughter, no warmth. It suddenly felt like a stranger's house. On the floor, in the corner, his tiny sneakers were still there, caked with a bit of dried mud. But his laugh, the laugh I carried with me through all those lonely nights away, was gone. I sank into a chair, the divorce papers in my hand, and at the bottom of the page, scrawled in a rush, one more line. If you truly love Lucas, let him have peace. Peace. Does that mean I, the father he always waited for, am the very thing that kept him from it? I buried my face in my hands. I had never known silence like this. The day I came back was supposed to be the day I held my son again. Turns out, it was the day I learned I no longer had a home to come back to. I'm Nathan Cole, 37, an oil field engineer. Sounds steady on paper, but the price I pay is a life always away from home. For the last 9 years, my life has been split in two. Half of it on offshore rigs covered in red dust. The other half, brief, fragile, are the days I get to come home, trying to make it up to Emily and Lucas. I used to believe that as long as I made enough money, my family would be safe. Looking back now, that belief was painfully naive. Emily, the woman I love, was there when I had nothing. She waited for me through a year in Angola, gave birth to Lucas alone, with nothing but a shaky satellite call in her ear. Lucas, my boy, loves airplanes. Every time I came home, he made me lie down on the living room floor. The two of us, side by side, drawing airplanes with pencils. He'd scribble something, then burst out laughing. Dad, I'm calling this one Skyrider. When you come back, we'll make it fly, okay? Those little moments made me think maybe all my absences could be fixed somehow. But lately, I started to see the cracks. One night on a video call, Lucas looked at me through the screen and asked, Dad, why are you always stuck inside that phone? I smiled. I nodded. I said, I'll be home soon. But when the call ended, I just sat there. That question stuck like a thorn in my chest. And Emily, the last time she took me to the airport, she stood by the kitchen window, holding a cup of coffee she never drank. I hugged her and said, 6 months. I'll be back. She nodded, smiled. But now, when I think of it, that smile was so thin, like a piece of glass already cracked. 6 months turned into 9. Texts came less often. Calls got shorter. I kept telling myself, she's just busy. When I get back, it'll be fine. But when I finally came back, all I found was an empty house. And that letter, that night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the middle of the living room, looking at Lucas's old toys, the messy drawings still pinned on the fridge. I searched for anything. A note, an address, a trace of where they'd gone. There was only silence. The neighbors shook their heads. She packed up in one night. Didn't tell a soul. By morning, the house was locked. My mother-in-law picked up the phone and said just one thing. Don't look for her, Nathan. Leave her be. And hung up. It felt like the whole neighborhood had agreed to keep quiet. No one would give me an answer. That's when I realized I had spent so many years in faraway places that the one thing closest to me, my family, had slipped right out of my hands. The next morning, I locked the door and stood on the porch for a long time. I had no idea where to go, where to even start. But inside, there was one thing I knew for sure. I have to find out why, even if that letter told me not to. I will. I started with whatever was left behind. A few bank statements, some utility bills. I went through every charge, hoping to find a new address. But it all stopped a month ago. From the day Emily left, there hasn't been a single trace. The next morning, I went to see Frank Miller, an old friend of my father's, once our family lawyer. After hearing me out, he just sat there for a long while, then said quietly, "Nate, when a woman leaves with a child, it means she planned it well. At this point, the law is your only way." I sat there in that small office, rolling a pen in my fingers, feeling hollow inside. Never in my life did I think there would come a day I'd have to go to court just to ask for the right to see my own son. That night, back in the house, now just an empty shell, I opened my laptop. I searched for old videos. And there he was. Lucas, 6 years old, standing in the yard, holding up a paper plane, shouting, "Dad, come home quick this time, okay?" I reached out, touched his little face on the screen. Those bright eyes, like two tiny stars. And in that moment I realized, for years, all I had given him were promises that went nowhere. I glanced at the corner of the room, where the suitcase still sat untouched. Inside, the toys, the clothes I'd bought for him over 9 long months. Each one I had picked out carefully, picturing him running into my arms. Now they just sat there, waiting. I pulled out the smallest shirt, pressed it to my face. The fabric was cold. No trace of my boy's scent. On the day of my appointment at Frank's office, a light rain was falling. His office was tucked away on an old street, glass fogged up from the drizzle. He handed me a folder. "We'll file a request for mediation. If the court can find her, she'll be summoned." I signed. The pen felt as heavy as a stone. Frank put a hand on my shoulder. "Nate," he said, his voice low, "be ready. For a woman to stay silent for 9 months, it means there's something inside her you've never been able to reach." In the days that followed, I rented a small apartment, turned the living room wall into a family map. I covered it with photos of Lucas, from the day he was born to now. Pictures of Emily holding him, old letters, plane tickets. I sat there every night, trying to piece together the fragments of a home that was already gone. Every night, I opened our old messages. The last video call before everything went dark. Lucas looked at me through the screen, then turned it off. That image stuck in my head like a cut that wouldn't heal. A week later, my phone rang. The court office told me Emily agreed to appear for the first mediation session. On one condition, I had to come alone. I hung up and sank into the chair. Finally, after running in the dark for so long, I was going to see them, but my hands were soaked with sweat. I had no idea if this meeting would be my salvation or another blow. The night before, I didn't sleep. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my tired face, and wished for one thing. If I could say just one thing, let my son call me Dad one more time. That morning, I stopped in front of the mediation room, took a deep breath, my heart pounding like a drum. The door opened. Emily sat at the far end of the table, clutching her bag, head down, not looking at me. I stood there frozen, not sure if I was about to have a conversation or a trial. All I knew was this: the fight to bring my family back had just begun. The mediation room was small, so quiet that the ticking clock felt like it was drilling into my temples. The smell of damp paper and old wood made it feel less like an office, and more like a courtroom with no verdict yet. The door closed behind me. Click. A dry, sharp sound, like it had just shut out the entire world. Emily sat on the other side, head down, both hands gripping the straps of her bag so tight her knuckles had gone white. The clerk read through the procedure, voice flat and steady. "Today's session is to hear directly from both sides, before any lawyers step in." I pulled out a chair. The distance between us was only a few steps, but it felt farther than these past 9 months. My voice came out rough. "Emily, I just want to know, why did you leave like that?" Not a word. "You didn't give me a chance to hear anything before you disappeared." She glanced up for a second, eyes swollen, ringed with sleepless nights, then looked down again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nathan, this didn't start 9 months ago. It's been years, and one day, I just couldn't take it anymore. If it's just my job, I can change. All you had to do was say it." She shook her head, her voice breaking with every word. "You don't understand. It's not just about you being away. It's Lucas. He's not the same anymore." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" Emily bit her lip, tears spilling over her hands. "He panics every time he hears a plane. Every night, he wakes up screaming, crawls under the bed, yelling. Dad's never coming back. And lately, all he draws is the same thing. A dark room, a locked door. The doctor says he's traumatized. I've been taking him to therapy for months now. I froze. Why didn't you tell me? What for? You're on the other side of the world. Every time you appear and then disappear, it crushes him a little more. This time, I was afraid he wouldn't be able to get back up. The weight of it hit me square in the chest. All this time, I thought I was providing for them, and she was carrying it all alone, while my son was sinking deeper into the dark. I'm sorry, my voice cracked, but I can't just vanish from his life. I can't let my son grow up thinking I abandoned him. For the first time that day, Emily's eyes met mine. I don't want to cut you off from him. I just want him to be okay. Nathan, if you love him, you have to understand. Even your coming and going scares him. The clerk interrupted gently. You need to agree on visitation. Otherwise, this will go straight to court. I took a deep breath. I want to see him, even for just 1 hour. With supervision, if that's what it takes. Emily hesitated for a long time. Finally, she nodded. All right, once? Next week. At the court's playroom. But you have to promise. No pressure. No talk about him coming back with you. I nodded. Right now, just seeing him would be enough. The session ended. I walked out into the hallway. The sky outside was as gray as the day I first came home. But inside me, one cold question echoed. Was it only my absence? Or is there something else? That night, back in my small apartment, I opened the last video before they disappeared. I froze the frame at the very end. Lucas looking straight into the screen, right before he hung up. Behind him, at the end of a dark hallway, a door slightly open. And in that split second before the screen went black, I saw a figure, standing still, unmoving. I sat there staring. This time, I knew I hadn't imagined it. A chill crawled down my spine. Before I see my son next week, I have to find out what that shadow was. The day finally came. The children's playroom was at the very end of a long hallway. Clouds and rainbows painted on the walls. But the moment I stepped in, all the colors seemed to fade. All I could hear was the sound of my shoes on the floor, and my own heartbeat, heavy with every step. The smell of plastic toys mixed with disinfectant burned my throat dry. Somewhere, a toy wheel rolled across the floor, but there was no laughter. A place meant to be cheerful felt as cold as a basement. The staff led me to the door. Through the glass, I saw Emily sitting beside Lucas. He was smaller, thinner than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, his head down. But what hurt the most was his eyes. The same eyes that used to light up at the sight of me were now blank. I stepped inside. Emily gave me a small nod, a silent signal to be gentle. Lucas, I called softly. He flinched. His tiny hands clutched his mother's arm. I stopped, kneeled down to his level. It's me, buddy. I missed you so much. He glanced at me for just a second, then turned away, pressing himself tighter into her side. I reached out, wanting to touch his shoulder, but the moment he pulled back, I froze. My hand just hung there in the air. That empty space between us hurt more than any blade. A staff member tried to break the ice. Would you like to draw with your dad? There are pencils over there. Emily bent down, whispered something in his ear. Lucas hesitated for a long time. Finally, he let go of her hand and walked to the table. I sat across from him in silence. The sound of his pencil scratching the paper was soft, but it tore through the stillness like glass breaking. I just want to watch you draw, I said quietly. You don't have to say a word. Shapes began to appear. A room, a closed door with heavy bolts, and in front of it, a tall shadow. No face, just a solid block of black. I swallowed hard. Lucas, what's this? I asked gently. He stopped. For a split second, his eyes met mine, wide, terrified, pleading. Emily shook her head, motioning me not to push. But Lucas whispered, voice trembling, Dad, don't let that person come into the house again. I went cold. Who? I asked, my voice shaking. No answer. He crumpled the paper in his fists and threw it to the floor, then bolted into Emily's arms, holding her like he was holding on for his life, his whole body trembling. Emily quietly asked to end the visit early. The long hallway swallowed the two of them as they walked away. I stood frozen, my arms still empty. The court staff picked up the wrinkled drawing and handed it to me. Even crumpled, the image was clear. A locked door, and that tall, faceless shadow, painted so dark it almost erased itself from the light. Back at my apartment, I laid the drawing flat on the table. Next to it, I opened the last video I had. I went frame by frame. The final second, Lucas staring at the screen, about to hang up. And behind him, down the hallway, right where that door was, a figure leaning into view. No face, just tall, blocking the door. I placed the drawing next to the screen. The shadow on the page. The shadow in the video. Perfectly the same. A chill crept up my spine. For the first time, it was clear. What my son fears is not just my absence. That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the wrinkled page. Only one thought remained. Before I can ask my son to forgive me, I have to uncover the truth, or I'll lose him forever. After that visit in the playroom, the image of that door and the shadow wouldn't leave me alone. By day, it flickered in my head. By night, it came back clear as daylight. I knew I couldn't just sit there anymore. I went back to the old house, where it all began. The house was locked tight, cold, like a block of stone. Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor across the street, pulled me onto her porch and lowered her voice. That night, they left close to midnight. There was a man with them, tall, black coat, hat pulled down, didn't speak to anyone. The boy, Lucas, wouldn't let go of his mother. He cried until he lost his voice, and he wouldn't let that man touch him. My chest tightened. Did you see his face? She shook her head. It was too dark. But I remember that boy was shaking so bad he could barely stand. The man in black. Could that be the same someone Lucas drew? That night, I opened the last video again. This time, frame by frame. The room dimly lit. Lucas with his back to the door. And then the shadow appeared. Not just standing there. Right before the screen went black, a hand reached out, stopped just short of his shoulder, then pulled back. A sudden flash, and the call cut out. One more second, and that hand would have touched my son. The next morning, I went to the therapist's office. They couldn't share details, but when I showed them the court paper, the doctor said one thing. Lucas keeps drawing the same thing over and over, a shadow at the door. And when we ask him, he only says, that person will come in if the door opens. She stopped there, gave me a look I'll never forget. I walked out numb, couldn't even feel the ground under my feet. That night, I spread everything out on the table. The wrinkled drawing, a screenshot of that shadow in the video, Mrs. Peterson's words about that night. Piece by piece, it formed a blurred picture, a man, and a fear so deep it had broken my son. I hired a private investigator, Mark, 50 years old, a man with tired eyes that had seen too much. When I finished, he only said, if you want the truth, you start with where they live now. But be ready. Sometimes the truth cuts deeper than the fear. A week later, Mark sent me the first photos. He had found where Emily was staying, a third-floor apartment, photos taken from a distance, curtains half-drawn. In one of them, taken at night, a pale yellow light, and behind Emily, a tall figure walking past, head tilted, face swallowed by shadow. It felt like someone had drilled through my chest. Jealousy, fear, helplessness. Then Mark laid one last photo on the table. My heart stopped. Through the thin curtain, Lucas was sitting on the window ledge, staring straight out. His eyes, exactly like in that last video, wide open, frozen with panic. Except this time, those eyes were looking right at me. I folded the photo, my hands shaking. This was no longer just longing. It was a silent plea for help. That night, I just sat there, staring at the photo of Lucas. His eyes looked like they were trying to say something his lips couldn't. I knew then. I couldn't sit still anymore. The next morning, I called Mark. I want to see it myself. Take me there. Mark gave a slow nod. We parked at the corner of the street, facing their new apartment. An old building, gray walls, narrow balconies. Their place was on the third floor. Curtains drawn, just slightly open. We waited inside the car. Evening light poured over the empty street. At exactly 7, a light flickered on inside. And there he was. A tall man moved across the room behind the curtains. Then he stopped. Just stood there, like he was looking straight out. The dim light only revealed a tall frame, broad shoulders, his face swallowed in the dark. I tried to see more, heart pounding in my chest. Who was he? Mark put a hand on my shoulder. Don't. Not yet. We don't know anything. A moment later, the figure vanished. The curtains closed. 2 days later, Mark called. "Tomorrow morning, Emily will take Lucas to the park near their place." I decided I'd be there, not to confront, just to see. That morning, the park was quiet. I stood behind a row of trees, my heart thundering. From a distance, Emily walked with Lucas. My boy wore a gray jacket, small, thin, walking close to her side, head down. And him, the tall man in a black coat, following a few steps behind, silent, like a shadow. Every time a stranger passed by, Lucas pressed closer into his mother. Emily kept looking over her shoulder, her eyes wary. He didn't look like family, didn't look like someone she trusted. He looked like a shadow she had no choice but to let follow. They stopped by a bench. Lucas sat, head down, playing with a small rock in his hands. The man stood still behind them. A gust of wind came. A small toy car slipped from Lucas's hands, rolling away. He froze, didn't dare to run after it. The man stepped forward to pick it up, and the moment he reached for it, Lucas panicked, jumped back, burst into tears, his whole body shaking. Emily pulled him in tight. "Give it to me," she said. The man handed it back without a word, then stepped away. But the way he glanced at Lucas sent ice down my spine. In that moment, I understood. Lucas wasn't just scared. He was terrified of him. A gust of wind blew back the man's coat. On his wrist, a tattoo. A key. I burned that image into my mind. Emily suddenly turned. Her eyes swept across the park. I held my breath, pressed myself against the tree. When I looked again, they were gone. Their 3 shadows lost in the crowd. That night, I called Mark. "Find me everyone with a key tattoo who's ever been around Emily." A few days later, Mark called back. "There's a name, Daniel. He used to work as a temporary babysitter when you were away. He has a sealed record, child abuse, and a tattoo of a key, exactly like you described." I went silent. And Emily, why would she let him near Lucas? Mark exhaled. He might have something on her, or he's threatening her. That same night, Mark sent me a security camera video from the apartment building. Nighttime. Daniel, standing outside Emily's door, not knocking, not calling, just standing there, waiting. For minutes, like a living shadow, waiting for the door to open. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my skin. That's it. Set up a meeting with Emily. If Daniel shows up, I'll face him. Mark paused for a long moment, then said quietly, "All right, but be ready. The truth you're about to hear won't be easy." That night, I put my hand on Lucas's photo and whispered, "This time, son, I won't back down." That afternoon, the sky was thick and gray. Mark pulled up on the narrow street in front of Emily's apartment. "You ready?" he asked. I drew a deep breath. This time, I need to hear everything. The hallway was tight. The smell of old paint clung to the air. Mark knocked. Footsteps approached from the other side. The door opened. Emily stood there, her face pale and worn. A man's voice came from inside. "Who is it?" And then he stepped out, tall, black coat, a key tattooed on his wrist. "Daniel." Heat rushed to my face, but Mark's hand pressed firmly on my shoulder. Emily spoke quietly. "If you've come this far, come in. But promise, you only listen." I stepped inside. The apartment was small, dim yellow light. The air felt heavy, as if someone else was watching from just outside. On the table, scattered toys. From the back room, I saw Lucas curled up against a pillow, the door half closed. The moment his eyes met mine, he looked away. Emily stepped between us. "Don't force him. He's not ready." I looked straight at Daniel. "What did you do to make my son this terrified of you?" He said nothing. Emily sat down, her voice rough. "Nathan, this didn't start when you left for work. It started before that." She began slowly. "While you were away, I was drowning in work. I hired a sitter through an agency, Daniel. At first, everything seemed fine. Lucas was happy, until one night." Emily drew a deep breath, her eyes wet. "The neighbors said they heard Lucas screaming. I ran home, but the door, it was locked from the outside. All I could hear was him screaming, 'Don't let him in again.'" Her voice cracked. "And you weren't there." It felt like someone had crushed my chest. All these years I thought I was protecting them. But when they needed me most, I wasn't there. I fired him. But from that night on, Lucas was terrified of any man in the house. Emily looked straight into my eyes. And Daniel, he's the one who broke the lock that night to get me inside. He isn't the one Lucas fears. The one who terrified him was someone else, someone who had gotten in before. I turned to Daniel. If it wasn't you, then why are you still here? Daniel spoke quietly. Because I saw him too, and I know. He's not finished. I stay because someone has to stand guard at the door. Emily added, the shadow in the drawings in the video, it isn't Daniel. It's the man from that night. Ever since then, Lucas has been haunted by the sound of a key turning in a lock. The air in the room went still, frozen. A chill crawled up my spine. Everything I thought I knew had just been turned upside down. Daniel met my eyes. I have a suspicion, and he might still be close. Right then, Lucas screamed from the back room. He's at the door. He's at the door again. And at the same time, 3 loud knocks shook the apartment. Bung, bung, bung. Through the frosted window next to the door, a shadow slid past. 3 knocks. Heavy, like hammers. Emily pulled Lucas into the back room. He sobbed, no longer screaming, his eyes wide, frozen in place. Daniel rushed to the door, but I stepped forward, voice raw. I'll do it. The apartment was so quiet, I could hear my own heart pounding. I turned the lock. The door swung open. A man stood there. Black coat, cap pulled low, broad shoulders. He lifted his head. Michael, my cousin. The hallway disappeared. All I could see was his familiar face. And the ice running down my spine? In a flash, every memory came back. All those times I trusted him with a key, asked him to watch the house. And that same hand, the one I trusted, was the hand my son has feared for months. Why? My voice cracked. Michael stepped in. I blocked his way, but his eyes looked past me, straight to where Lucas was hiding. You were gone too long, he said slowly. She was lonely. I was just there. The words stabbed like a knife. That night, it was you, he shrugged. I only came to talk. The boy saw me and locked the door. How is that my fault? Then he moved again, this time toward Lucas. Mark stepped in, blocking him, his voice sharp. One more step, and you'll regret it. The police are on their way. Daniel stood close behind, fists clenched. The air so tight it could snap. Michael stopped. His eyes swept across the room, finally landing on me. You think you're protecting them. You left them long before I showed up. The words cut straight through me. Guilt, rage, shame, all of it rising, choking me. I wanted to lunge at him, but Mark's grip on my shoulder held me back. Emily came to the doorway, holding Lucas, pale as a ghost. Leave, Michael. Now. From outside, the wail of police sirens grew closer. Michael smirked, took a step back. But before leaving, he turned his head toward me, his eyes dark as pitch. I'll be back. You'll never be able to hold on to what you love. The door slammed shut. Inside, all that was left was the sound of heavy breathing. I turned around, knelt down beside my son. I didn't say a word. I just held out my hand. Lucas stared at me for a long time. Then slowly, his small hand rested in mine. For the first time in months, the distance between us began to close. Daniel turned away quietly, leaving only one sentence behind. Now is when the real protecting begins. That night, after the police left, I stepped out to the balcony. The wind was sharp and cold. Below, the empty street glowed under a few pale yellow lights. I thought about Michael, about what he said, and I realized the darkest shadows aren't always outside. Sometimes they live in the places we thought were safe. Far down the street, a tall figure stood still for a few seconds, and then slipped away into the night. The next morning, the city looked as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something had collapsed. At the police station, after giving my statement, I asked, "Will he be arrested?" The officer just shook his head. "We'll keep an eye on him. But there's not enough evidence to hold him." I walked out of the station with one thought pressing in. That shadow was still free. By noon, my apartment was cold. Too quiet. I sat there, staring at the empty white walls. For the first time, I saw clearly the space I'd left behind. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Thank you for last night." Lucas finally slept. Still scared, but I think he's starting to trust again. I stared at those words for a long time, and in the middle of the mess, a small light flickered on. I called her back. "Tomorrow, can I see Lucas? Just the two of us." There was silence for a few seconds. Then she said, "All right." But don't bring up last night. The next day, I went back to their apartment. Lucas was sitting in the living room, clutching a teddy bear. The afternoon light spilled through the window, laying a pale gold over his small face. I didn't go to him. I just sat down on the floor, keeping a distance. "Hi, buddy." He looked at me, eyes still cautious. I opened my bag and pulled out an old toy car, the birthday present from 2 years ago. I placed it gently on the floor. "I found this. Remember?" Lucas hesitated. Then a small hand reached out, touching the wheel. The light from the window reflected in his eyes. Still scared, but softer. We sat there, rolling the car back and forth. For a long time, no words. Just the soft clatter of plastic wheels on the floor. Then his voice, barely a whisper, like a breeze. "Dad, he came for me again yesterday." I stopped, tried to keep my voice steady. "I saw, but this time, I'm here. No one's ever going to hurt you again." Lucas looked at me, a long pause. Then he nodded. Just a small nod, but my chest felt like it could burst. On my way out, Emily stood at the door. I turned to her. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep him safe. And I'm sorry." She looked at me, silent. I thought working hard was enough. But that gap I left behind was the door Michael walked through. Emily spoke softly. "We both made mistakes. But from now on, the only thing that matters is him." In the weeks that followed, I visited Lucas often. At first, just sitting there quietly. Then slowly, he started talking more. One day, he looked at me and said softly, "Dad, can you stay a little longer?" A short sentence. But to me, it was worth more than everything else in the world. Michael hasn't disappeared. The police called him in, then let him go. Every night, I find myself listening, as if someone's standing just outside the door. One afternoon, Mark called. "Michael's back at his mother's place. But I don't think he's done. You need to be ready." I gripped the phone tight. "Mark, this time we don't wait." I knew one thing. If I don't take the first step, that shadow will haunt my son forever. 3 days later, I drove out to a small house on the edge of town, where Michael lives with his mother. I didn't come for revenge. I came to close the door on this. The porch was silent. I knocked. Michael opened the door. No cap, no coat, none of that defiance. Just a hollow face and red, tired eyes. He looked at me, gave a faint smile. "So, you finally came." We stood on the porch, a few steps apart. I didn't step inside. "You made my son live in fear for months," I said, slow and steady. "From today on, you no longer have a place in his life." Michael stayed silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I was wrong. But you know what? I only wanted what you once had." "What I had?" I stared at him. "I've already lost most of it." "At least you still have a family to go back to," he said, with a faint, broken smile. "I don't." In his eyes, I saw a void, deep and endless. The anger in me slowly faded. All that was left was a heavy sadness. "Whatever your reasons," I said, "you crossed a line. If it happens again, the police will take it from here." Michael lowered his head. He said nothing more, just stepped back inside and shut the door. The sound of the wooden door echoed like it was closing on an entire past. On the drive home, I called Mark. "It's done. From now on, the rest is up to the police. I'm spending what's left of my life on my son." Mark was quiet for a moment, then said, "You made the right choice." In the weeks that followed, everything slowly changed. No more shadows standing outside the door. No more calls in the middle of the night. Lucas and I began a new routine. Every afternoon, I'd take him to the park. At first, he clung tightly to my hand, eyes fixed on the ground. But little by little, his small feet began to run again, and the smile started to come back. One afternoon, in the soft wind, he looked up, breathing hard. "Dad, can we come here again tomorrow?" A simple question, but to me, it was a miracle. Emily and I didn't get back together. We talk little now, but we both understand. The only thing that matters is Lucas. One night, after dropping Lucas off, he stood at the door and turned back to me. "Dad, today was a good day." I knelt down and hugged him. This time, he didn't pull away. That night, I stood by my apartment window. The city was still lit outside, but for the first time in months, there was no one standing in the street below, only the yellow glow reflecting my own face on the glass, calmer than it had been in a long time. Some wounds never fully go away, but they've taught me one thing. No matter what happens, I will stand by my son so that he will never have to face the darkness alone again. Some stories never close neatly. Finding the one who brought the shadow doesn't suddenly make life peaceful. Real life always leaves cracks. It took me a long time to understand that. The night I last saw Michael at the door, I thought all I needed was to drive him away. But I was wrong. Darkness doesn't just come from outside. It lives in the spaces we leave in each other's lives. I used to believe that working myself to the bone, providing enough money, that was enough to be a good man for my family. But the truth is, when I wasn't there for the ordinary days, that empty space became a way for the dark to slip in. There are moments that still stab me even now. Lucas standing behind his bedroom door, shaking, unable to even look at me. His eyes back then were like a small bird left alone in its nest. And then today, in the park, those same small hands reached out and held mine on their own. That's when I realized fear doesn't disappear in one night. It only fades slowly, with love and patience, one day at a time. Emily and I never got back together, but between us now, there's no anger, no regret, just two adults standing on the same side. On Lucas's side, I have made mistakes, but from this moment on, every day is a chance to do better. One afternoon, as we were sitting on the floor, rolling a toy car back and forth, Lucas looked up at me and asked, "Dad, when will I stop being scared?" I didn't tell him tomorrow or soon. I just placed my hand on his head and said, "It's okay to be scared. Just remember this. Every time you turn around, I'll still be right here." He said nothing, but he held my hand a little tighter. And to me, that was the very first step of courage. If you're listening to this story, and you carry an empty space of your own, a hurt, someone who left, or a shadow you can't shake, I want you to know this. You're not alone. Some scars never go away, but from them, we learn how to hold on to what we have right now. Healing doesn't come from forgetting the past. It comes from standing next to each other, no matter what the darkness outside looks like. Tonight, the city lights are still glowing. I stand by the window, watching them stretch across the street, and in the glass, next to my own reflection, is a smaller face. Lucas, asleep, at peace. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but this time, I've learned how to walk through them, not alone.